At the end of my daughter's wedding reception, I grabbed a white linen napkin from the table and quickly scribbled something down with a shaking hand. The letters came out crooked, barely legible, but every word burned with the urgency of what I had just discovered. Then I discreetly signaled a waiter and whispered into his ear with a breaking voice, "Hand this to my daughter, please, and make sure my son-in-law doesn't see it. Isaac." That was his name. He noticed the look of absolute panic on my face, the cold sweat on my forehead, the way my fingers desperately squeezed his arm. But when my daughter Ellen finally read what I wrote, her face went as white as a sheet, as if all the blood had drained from her body. She grabbed Isaac's hand tightly, and her eyes filled with pure terror as she choked out, "Help me!" Those 2 words changed everything. But to understand how we got to that devastating moment, I have to go back 3 hours, back to when the night still felt magical, and I still believed my daughter had found true love. The music was soft in the event hall, a romantic melody floating between the golden lights strung from the ceiling like stars trapped in glass. The intoxicating scent of white roses and vanilla candles filled every corner of the place. It was past 9 o'clock, and the last few guests were dancing on the floor while champagne flutes sparkled on the tables decorated with pearl-colored tablecloths. I was sitting alone at a secluded table, watching my daughter Ellen spin in the arms of Damon, her new husband. She wore that delicate lace, ivory-colored dress that made her look like a princess out of a dream, and her smile lit up the entire room with a happiness I hadn't seen in her for years. My eyes welled up, because this was my little girl, the child I raised alone after her father died, the woman who went through a painful divorce and who finally seemed to have found peace. I spent $52,000 on this wedding, every cent saved from years of hard work, because I wanted to give her the most perfect day of her life. And up until that moment, it was. Damon seemed like the ideal son-in-law, tall, elegant, with that impeccable black tuxedo that made him look like a movie star, always smiling, always attentive, always knowing exactly what to say to make us feel special. He had swept Ellen off her feet in 6 whirlwind months, and 3 months after that, they were engaged. Everything moved so fast that sometimes I felt dizzy just trying to process the speed of their romance, but he seemed genuinely in love. He called me Rita with warm respect, brought me flowers every Sunday, asked about my health, and helped me with my grocery bags when he visited. Ellen was more radiant than ever by his side, laughing lightly and carelessly, something she hadn't done since before her first marriage. I only wanted to see her happy again. That's why I accepted everything without asking too many questions. That's why I ignored that uneasy feeling in my stomach every time Damon looked at our house with calculating eyes, or when his pupils shone strangely when he heard about the inheritance my husband left me. Small signs I dismissed as a paranoid, overprotective mother's worries. But mothers always know when something isn't right. Always. It was almost the clock was 11 minutes past 0 hours when I decided to go to the restroom to touch up my makeup. The event hall was enormous, with long corridors decorated with antique mirrors and champagne-colored drapes. I walked slowly because my shoes were hurting after so many hours on my feet. The music became muffled the further I got from the main ballroom. The hallways were almost empty, just a few scattered people smoking near the exit or talking on their phones. I passed by the kitchen and heard the clatter of dishes and the voices of the staff working. Isaac was among them, supervising to ensure everything was running smoothly. He was a young man, perhaps the clock was 30 minutes past 0 hours, with a kind face and efficient movements. All night, I had seen him work with silent dedication, making sure every detail was perfect. I didn't know then that Isaac would become my only ally when everything fell apart. I kept walking toward the restroom at the end of the hall, but then I heard male voices coming from a small sitting room reserved for the bride and groom. The door was ajar, and a sliver of yellow light escaped into the dark corridor. I immediately recognized Damon's voice. He was speaking in a completely different tone than the one he used with us. Colder, more calculating, stripped of that false warmth he always displayed. I stopped dead in my tracks. Something inside me told me I had to listen. I approached slowly, holding my breath, and pressed myself against the wall next to the door. My heart began to pound so hard, I was afraid they might hear it. "Everything went perfectly, Richard. The old lady is completely convinced that I love her." It was Damon's voice, but it sounded mocking, cruel, nothing like the sweet voice he used with Ellen and me. My legs started to tremble. I held on to the wall to keep from falling. "Do you have access to the accounts yet?" asked another male voice, which I presumed belonged to this Richard. Damon let out a dry laugh and responded, "Not yet, but it's a matter of days. That idiot Ellen already signed the marriage papers, and tomorrow I'm going to convince her to put everything in both our names. She says her mother has more than $200,000 saved up, plus the house that's easily worth another $300,000. $500,000. Brother, $500,000 for putting up with a boring woman for a few more months." I felt as if someone had plunged a knife into my chest. Damon's words echoed in my head like funeral bells. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I couldn't process what I was hearing. "What about the mother?" Richard asked casually, as if they were discussing the weather. "The mother is the real prize," Damon replied, his voice full of greed. "That old lady is lonely, vulnerable, and she trusts me completely. Once I have power of attorney over Ellen's finances, I'll convince Rita to invest her money in a business I have prepared. A ghost business, obviously. In 6 months, I disappear with everything, and they'll be left with nothing. I've already done it 2 times before, and it worked perfectly." My vision blurred. 2 times before. This monster had already destroyed other families, and now he was coming for mine, for my daughter, for everything we built with so much sacrifice. Richard laughed and said, "You're a genius, Damon. But be careful. Old ladies are sometimes smarter than they look." Damon replied with absolute arrogance, "Not this one. Rita is a sentimental fool who only wants to see her daughter happy. She's so easy to manipulate that I almost feel sorry for her. But hey, business is business." I heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly backed away, hiding behind a decorative column. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. I saw Damon walk out of the room with another tall, robust man, both laughing as if they had just told the world's best joke. They walked right past me without seeing me and headed back to the main ballroom. I stayed paralyzed, trembling from head to toe, with tears beginning to stream down my cheeks. My worst nightmare had just come true. My daughter had married a scammer, a predator who planned to completely destroy us. And the worst part was, Ellen had no idea. She was in the ballroom, happy, in love, trusting, dancing in the arms of the man who would betray her mercilessly. I don't know how long I stayed hidden there, trying to process the magnitude of what I had just discovered. Maybe it was minutes, maybe it was hours. Time had stopped. My mind was racing at 1,000 miles an hour, but my body was frozen. I had to do something. I had to protect my daughter. But how? If I told her directly, Damon would deny everything, and Ellen probably wouldn't believe me. She was so in love, so blind, so convinced she had found happiness. And Damon was so convincing, so manipulative. He had answers for everything, perfect excuses, that charming smile that disarmed any doubt. If I accused him without proof, he would make me look like the jealous, paranoid mother who didn't want to let go of her daughter. Ellen might even push me away to defend her husband. I couldn't risk that. I needed a plan. I needed to act smartly. I took several deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand and walked slowly back to the ballroom. Every step was a monumental effort. I had to pretend everything was fine. I had to smile. I had to act normal while I was crumbling inside. When I entered the ballroom, the party was continuing as if nothing had happened. The lights were still shining, the music was still playing, people were still dancing and laughing. But for me, everything had changed. The world looked different, darker, more dangerous. I saw Damon next to Ellen, hugging her with false tenderness, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh. Watching him act turned my stomach. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run toward them and tear my daughter away from his poisonous arms, but I held back. I had to be strategic. I sat down at my table and observed everything with new eyes. Now I could see the signs I had ignored before. The way Damon touched Ellen was possessive, calculated, not loving. The way his eyes scanned the room was that of a hunter evaluating his territory. Every smile of his was a perfectly constructed mask, and I had fallen into his trap like a fool. I had allowed this man into our lives. I had paid for this expensive wedding. I had handed my daughter over to him without asking the right questions. Guilt was choking me, but I didn't have time to wallow. I had to act fast. Then I saw Isaac pass near my table, carrying a tray with empty glasses. Our eyes met for a second, and something in my expression must have alarmed him because he stopped and asked in a low voice, "Are you all right, Mrs. Rita? You look very pale." I opened my mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come out. My eyes filled with tears again, and I had to bite my lip to keep from sobbing. Isaac put the tray down on the table and leaned toward me with genuine concern. "Do you need me to call someone? A doctor?" I shook my head and finally managed to whisper, "I need help. My daughter is in danger." Those words sounded dramatic, even crazy, but it was the truest thing I had ever said in my entire life. Isaac frowned in confusion and asked, "What kind of danger?" I looked around to make sure no one was listening and told him everything in desperate, clipped phrases. I told him about the conversation I had overheard, about Damon's plans, about the money, about the other victims. Isaac listened with absolute attention, and his expression shifted from confusion to alarm and then to determination. "That scumbag," Isaac muttered, clenching his fists. "I knew something was wrong with that guy. All night, I've watched how he looks at his wife. It's not the look of a man in love, it's the look of someone who is acting." His words gave me a strange sense of relief because it meant I wasn't crazy, that my instincts hadn't failed me. "What do I do?" I asked with a broken voice. "If I tell Ellen right now, Damon will deny everything, and she won't believe me. But if I don't do anything, tomorrow will be too late. He's going to convince her to sign papers, to give him access to everything." Isaac thought for a moment, his eyes moving quickly as he processed the situation. Then he said, "You have to get her out of here tonight, before they leave for the honeymoon, before he has a chance to manipulate her further. But you have to do it in a way that looks natural, that doesn't raise suspicion." I nodded desperately, but my mind was blank. How? How do I get her out without Damon noticing? Isaac looked toward the couple and then looked at me with determination. "Write something on a napkin. Something short but forceful that makes her understand the urgency. I will discreetly hand it to her and help her leave through the kitchen. Damon is distracted with his friends now. It's the perfect time." My hand trembled when I took a linen napkin from the table. I searched for a pen in my purse, and for a few seconds, I didn't know what to write. How do you summarize a devastating betrayal in a few words? How do you tell your daughter that the man who just swore eternal love to her is a liar and a thief? Finally, I wrote in shaky letters, "Ellen, Damon is a scammer. I heard him planning to steal everything from us. You have to leave now. Trust me. Mom." I folded the napkin and handed it to Isaac with sweaty hands. He took it and nodded firmly. "Wait here. Do not make eye contact with your daughter when I hand this to her. Act normal." Isaac walked naturally toward where Ellen was sitting, taking a drink of water, alone for a moment, because Damon had gone to greet some guests. My heart was beating so fast, I thought everyone in the room could hear it. I watched Isaac lean next to Ellen, as if offering to refill her glass, but he actually slid the napkin onto the table and whispered something to her. Ellen looked at him confused, picked up the napkin, and unfolded it. I looked away, pretending to be busy with my phone, but I could feel the tension in the air. A few seconds passed that felt like an eternity. Then I heard a choked gasp. I looked up and saw Ellen standing up, her face completely pale, holding the napkin with trembling hands. Her eyes searched for mine across the ballroom, and in them I saw confusion, fear, and something else, perhaps the beginning of understanding. Isaac was next to her, speaking to her in a low, urgent voice. Ellen looked toward Damon, who was still distracted, chatting and laughing with a group of men. Then she looked at the napkin again, then at me, then at Isaac. I could see the exact moment she made her decision. She grabbed Isaac's hand tightly, desperately, and said loud enough for me to hear from my table, "Help me!" Those two words cut through the noise of the party like a knife. Some nearby people turned to look, confused. Isaac acted fast. He took her arm firmly but gently and told her, "Come with me, quickly." They started walking toward the kitchen, but Ellen was swaying, her legs barely holding her up. I jumped out of my chair, my maternal instinct stronger than any plan. I ran toward them and took Ellen's other arm, helping to support her. "What is going on here?" I heard Damon's voice behind us, full of false concern. "Ellen, honey, are you okay?" Ellen turned toward him, her eyes filled with tears, and for a second I thought she was going to run into his arms, that she was going to believe him instead of me. But then she took a step back, pulling away from him, and said with a trembling voice, "Don't come near me." Damon's expression subtly changed. Just for a fraction of a second the mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating in his eyes. But he immediately smiled again with concern and said, "What's wrong, my love? Do you feel sick? Is it the champagne?" He approached with sure steps, but Ellen backed away further, clinging to me and Isaac. "My daughter doesn't feel well," I said with a firm voice, though I was terrified inside. "I'm taking her home so she can rest." Damon looked at me, and in his eyes I saw a barely contained flash of rage. "It's our wedding night, Rita. I'll take care of my wife." The way he said my wife sounded possessive, threatening. "She wants to leave with me," I replied, holding his gaze even though my legs were shaking. "Now." The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Some guests had stopped dancing and were looking at us with curiosity. Damon was trapped. If he made a scene, he would raise suspicion. If he let us go, he would lose control of the situation. Finally, Damon gave in, but his smile became tense and forced. All right. If Ellen needs to rest, of course, but I'm coming with you." He started to take a step toward us, but Isaac subtly intercepted him and said, "Sir, I have to inform you that there's a problem with the payment for the event services. The manager needs to speak with you urgently in the office. It will only take a few minutes." Damon looked at him with clear distrust. "Now?" "Right now." Isaac nodded with a serious, professional expression. "It's about an additional charge of $3,000 that wasn't in the original budget. If it's not resolved tonight, you won't be able to take the gifts or the decorations." It was a brilliant lie. Damon clenched his jaw, clearly frustrated, but money was his weakness. He couldn't ignore something related to money. "Fine," he finally said, with tension in his voice. "But Ellen, my love, I'll call you in 10 minutes. Get some rest, and then we'll go home together, okay?" He approached to kiss her, but she turned her face, and the kiss landed on her cheek. I saw a flash of fury in Damon's eyes, but he quickly concealed it. He turned around and walked toward the office with rigid steps. The moment he disappeared from our sight, Isaac urged us, "You need to leave now. When he finds out it was a lie, we'll have 5 minutes at most." We walked quickly toward the kitchen, practically dragging Ellen, who seemed to be in a state of shock. The cooks and waiters looked at us in surprise, but Isaac motioned to them that everything was fine. We went out the back door that led to the service parking lot. The cold night air hit my face and helped to clear my head a little. "My car is on the other side," I said, looking for my keys in my purse with trembling hands. Ellen suddenly stopped and grabbed my shoulders tightly. Her eyes were red from crying, and her voice was broken when she asked, "Mom, tell me this is a nightmare. Tell me what you wrote isn't true." I looked her straight in the eyes and said with all the firmness I could muster, "I heard everything, my love. I heard Damon talking to another man. He planned everything. The romance, the wedding, everything was to rob us. He's done this before with other women." Ellen covered her mouth with her hands and let out a heartbreaking sob. "It can't be. It can't be. He loves me. He told me he loved me." Her knees gave out, and I had to hold her up so she wouldn't fall to the ground. Isaac intervened urgently. "Ladies, you have to move. He's going to come out any minute now." He was right. There was no time to process the pain now. That would come later. "Ellen, look at me," I said, taking her face in my hands. "I know it hurts. I know it's horrible, but you have to be strong right now. We have to leave before he catches up to us." Ellen nodded between sobs, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, ruining her perfect makeup. We ran toward my car, an old but reliable sedan parked in the third row. I unlocked the doors with the remote and helped Ellen into the passenger seat. Isaac closed the door and looked at me seriously. "Get far away tonight. Go to a relative's house, a hotel in another city, anywhere he can't easily find you. And first thing tomorrow morning, go to the police." I grabbed his hand with gratitude. "Thank you. I don't know what we would have done without you." He nodded and said, "Be careful, and keep that napkin. It could serve as evidence that you suspected something."
나탄 아임.
I got into the car, started the engine with trembling hands, and drove out of the parking lot as quickly as I could without drawing attention. In the rearview mirror, I saw Isaac running back toward the kitchen. My heart was pounding so hard I felt it was going to explode. Ellen was crying silently beside me, hugging herself, still in that beautiful wedding dress that now seemed like a cruel costume. I drove aimlessly for several minutes, just putting distance between us and that monster, getting further away from the place. The streets were almost empty at that hour of the night. Streetlights passed like orange flashes through the windows. Ellen finally spoke, her voice broken. "How could I have been so stupid? How did I not realize?" I reached out my hand and squeezed hers. "You're not stupid, my love. He's a professional. He knows exactly how to manipulate, how to gain trust. I fell for it too. I believed him too." She shook her head, and the tears kept falling. "But I married him, Mom. I married him just a few hours ago. What am I going to do now?" I didn't have easy answers for that question. I just knew we had to stay safe. I took out my phone and dialed the number of Hank, my lifelong friend who worked as a detective with the police department. He answered on the third ring with a sleepy voice. "Rita, what is it? Are you okay?" The concern in his voice made me feel a little safer. "Hank, I need urgent help. Ellen is in danger. Her husband is a scammer, and we need to hide tonight." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, and then Hank responded with a completely awake and alert voice. "Come to my house right now. Don't go home. Do you hear me? He'll know where you live. Come straight here." He gave me his address, and I hung up. I changed my route immediately, heading toward the north side of the city where Hank lived. Ellen had stopped crying, but now she was in a disturbing state of shock, staring ahead with empty eyes. "Ellen, talk to me," I said softly. "Tell me something. Anything." She blinked slowly and said in a barely audible voice, "I should have listened to you when you said everything was moving too fast. I should have seen the signs. But I was so lonely, Mom. After the divorce, I felt so broken that when Damon showed up and made me feel special again, I just wanted to believe the fairy tale." My heart broke upon hearing the pain in her voice. "It's not your fault, my love. None of this is your fault." I kept driving and constantly checking the rearview mirror to make sure no one was following us. The dark streets seemed threatening now. Every car behind us was a possible threat. Finally, we arrived at Hank's house, a modest 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood. He was already waiting for us at the door with a serious expression. We got out of the car and practically ran toward him. Hank quickly ushered us inside and locked the door. "You're safe here," he said, looking at us with concern. "Now tell me everything from the beginning." We sat down in his living room, and between sobs and broken words, I told him the whole story. I told him about how they met Damon, how fast everything was, the conversation I overheard, the escape with Isaac's help. Hank listened with absolute attention, taking notes in a small notebook. When I finished, he shook his head and said, "This sounds like an organized scheme. If he said he did this 2 times before, it means there are other victims. Tomorrow, I'm going to investigate his full name, his background, everything." Ellen looked up with swollen eyes and asked in a weak voice, "What if you don't find anything? What if I'm the one who's crazy and he really loves me?" Hank sat down across from her and spoke with firmness but gentleness. "Ellen, your mother has no reason to invent something like this." She heard what she heard. "And professional scammers are experts at not leaving obvious legal traces. But there is always something. They always make a mistake. I'll find it." I took out the crumpled napkin from my purse, that napkin that had changed everything, and showed it to Hank. Isaac, the waiter who helped us, said this could serve as evidence that we were suspicious. Hank took it carefully and examined it. "It's something, although it's not direct proof of anything. But combined with your testimony of what you heard, a case begins to be built. The most important thing now is that the two of you stay safe, and that Ellen doesn't sign any documents, doesn't give him access to any bank accounts, and is never alone with that man again." Ellen nodded slowly, like a robot following orders. She was still processing the magnitude of the betrayal. Hank made us hot tea and gave us blankets because we were both shaking, though I'm not sure if it was from the cold or the shock. It was almost the clock was 2 minutes past 0 hours when my phone started ringing. Damon's name appeared on the screen. My heart skipped a beat, and I looked at Hank in a panic. "Don't answer," he said firmly. "Let it ring." The phone rang and rang until it finally stopped. 30 seconds later, it started ringing again, and then again, and again. Damon called 15 times in a row. Then the text messages started coming in. I read them with trembling hands. "Ellen, honey, where are you? I'm worried sick." "Rita, please answer. I need to know Ellen is okay." "I don't understand what happened. Did I say something wrong? Did I do something that upset you? Please, just tell me where you are. I'm desperate." The messages sounded worried, loving, perfectly calculated. Anyone who read them would think it was an anguished husband, but I knew the truth. Every word was another lie. Hank took my phone and read the messages with a hard expression. "Typical," he muttered. "Now comes the gaslighting phase. He's going to make them feel guilty. He's going to feign confusion and concern. Then will come the anger." As if he had predicted it, the next message was different. "Rita, this is completely unacceptable. You can't take my wife without explanation. I demand that you tell me where Ellen is right now. And if you don't respond in 10 minutes, I'm going to call the police and report a kidnapping." Hank let out a bitter laugh. "Let him. I have colleagues in every precinct. I can handle that easily." But I felt nauseous. This man had been in my house, had eaten at my table, had completely gained my trust. And now he was threatening us. Ellen took my phone with trembling hands and started typing a response. "What are you doing?" I asked, alarmed. She looked at me with new determination in her eyes, as if something had been activated inside her. "I'm going to answer him. I'm going to tell him I know the truth." Hank quickly intervened. "No, not yet. If you tell him you know, he's going to disappear. He's going to erase all the evidence. He's going to change his identity. He's going to run. We have to keep him thinking he still has control of the situation while I investigate." Ellen slowly lowered the phone, frustrated but understanding the logic. The phone rang again, but this time it was an unknown number. Hank answered, putting it on speakerphone. "Hello?" It was Damon's voice, but now it sounded cold and controlled. "Who is this, and why do you have Rita's phone?" Hank responded with a professional voice. "I'm Detective Hank Rodriguez of the Municipal Police. Who do I have the pleasure of speaking with?" There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, Damon spoke in a softer, more cautious tone. "I'm Damon, Ellen's husband. I'm looking for my wife and my mother-in-law. They disappeared from our wedding without explanation, and I'm very worried." Hank responded calmly. "I understand your concern, sir. The ladies are fine and they are safe. There was a family emergency that required immediate attention. They will contact you when it is appropriate." Damon raised his voice slightly. "Family emergency? What kind of emergency? I'm her husband. I have a right to know." Hank maintained his professional tone. "For the moment, that is all the information I can give you. Have a good night, sir." And he hung up. Ellen looked at me with eyes full of fear and asked, "What is he going to do now? He knows something is wrong." Hank nodded gravely. "Exactly. And that means he's likely to speed up his plans or disappear. That's why I need to move fast. Ellen, I need you to give me all the information you have on Damon. Full name, date of birth, address, workplace, names of friends, everything." Ellen concentrated, trying to remember. "His full name is Damon Alexander Cortez. He said he is 35 years old. He was born in April, but I don't know the exact date. He lives in an apartment on the east side of the city, but he never let me visit it. He said it was too small, and he preferred to be at my house or in public places. He works in real estate sales. At least, that's what he told me. His friends? Now that I think about it, I never met any of his friends. He always had excuses for not introducing me to them." Hank wrote everything down quickly. And his family? Ellen shook her head. He said his parents died years ago, and he didn't have any siblings. He said he was all alone in the world. That's why he valued finding me so much. Her voice broke as she realized how every detail had been designed to manipulate her. Hank continued asking questions. Did he ever ask you for money directly? Ellen thought for a moment. Not directly, but a month ago he told me he had an incredible investment opportunity in a real estate development. He said if we invested $30,000 now, we would have double that amount in 6 months. He wanted us to use my savings for the honeymoon. I was about to agree, but Mom said we should wait until after the wedding. Now I understand she was right to be suspicious. I shuddered as I realized how close we had been to disaster. If I hadn't insisted on waiting, Ellen would have already lost $30,000. Hank closed his notebook and said, I'm going to start investigating right now. I have contacts who can search databases, even at this hour. The two of you try to get some sleep. There are 2 rooms upstairs. You can use either one. Early tomorrow, we'll go to the station and file a formal report. I felt grateful, but I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. Ellen didn't seem capable of resting either. We stayed sitting on the sofa, holding each other, while Hank worked on his computer at the dining room table. Dawn arrived, slow and gray. Neither of us had really slept. We had only closed our eyes occasionally between whispered conversations and silent tears. Hank hadn't slept either. He had deep dark circles under his eyes and several empty coffee mugs around his computer. When he saw us awake, he called us over, his voice urgent. Come and see this. We approached and looked at the screen. He had found something. Damon Alexander Cortez does not exist, Hank said with grim satisfaction. Or rather, the Damon Alexander Cortez who died 8 years ago in a traffic accident cannot be the same one who married Ellen yesterday. He's using a stolen identity. Ellen put her hand to her mouth. Then he's not even a real man. Hank continued, but I found something else. I searched similar fraud reports over the last 5 years. There are 2 almost identical cases. A woman in Texas lost $250,000 3 years ago to a man named Richard Vega. Another woman in Arizona lost $300,000 a year and a half ago to someone named Mason Montoya. In both cases, the man met them quickly, married them, gained access to their finances, and disappeared. My blood ran cold. Richard. That was the name of the man Damon was talking to in that room. That's the name I heard, I said with a trembling voice. Damon was talking to someone named Richard in the event hall. He said he had already done this 2 times before. It has to be the same person, just changing names each time. Hank nodded with a somber expression. Exactly. And look at this. He opened another window on his computer showing blurry surveillance photos. I managed to contact a colleague in Texas who worked on the first case. He sent me these photos of the suspect. The quality isn't great, but look at the facial features, the height, the build. I leaned toward the screen, and my stomach churned. It was him. Without a doubt, it was Damon. A little younger in the photos, with a different haircut, and without the beard he had now, but it was definitely the same person. Ellen sobbed when she saw him. It's him. Oh my God, it's really him. Everything was a lie from the beginning. Hank put a comforting hand on her shoulder. I'm so sorry, Ellen, but this information is gold. Now we have connections to previous cases. We have an established pattern. We have former victims who can testify. This man is going to jail. But I felt like something wasn't right. Hank, if he's done this before and gotten away with it 2 times, why haven't they caught him? Why isn't he in prison already? Hank sighed heavily. Because he's very good at what he does. In both previous cases, by the time the victims realized the fraud, he had already completely disappeared. He changed his identity, his city, his appearance. The money transfers were made to untraceable offshore accounts. And most importantly, both victims were so ashamed and emotionally devastated that they didn't want to go public with the case. One of them didn't even file an official report. The other one did, but without the active collaboration of the victim, the case quickly went cold. Ellen straightened up in her seat with renewed determination in her eyes. I'm not going to let him get away with it. I'm going to testify. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this man pay for what he did to us and for what he did to those other women." I felt proud of my daughter in that moment. Despite the devastating pain, despite the betrayal that shattered her heart, she was choosing to be strong. Hank smiled with approval. "That's exactly what I need to hear, but we have to be strategic. He still doesn't know we know about his true identity and his previous crimes. He thinks we're just scared or confused. That is our advantage." Just then, my phone vibrated with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "Rita, this is Isaac, the waiter from last night. I got your number from the event registry. I need to speak to you urgently. It's about Damon." I showed the message to Hank, who immediately said, "Call him. Put it on speakerphone." I dialed the number with trembling hands, and Isaac answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Rita, thank you for calling. Listen, something very strange happened this morning. I arrived early at the event hall to help with cleanup, and I found Damon there. He shouldn't be there. The event ended last night. He was reviewing the hall's security camera footage." My heart started beating faster. "What?" Isaac continued with an urgent voice. "Yes, he convinced the security guard that he needed to see the footage because something valuable was supposedly lost, but I saw him on the monitor. He was specifically reviewing the footage from the moment you left, and then he asked for copies of the footage where I appeared handing the napkin to Ellen." Hank leaned toward the phone and asked, "Did they give him the copies?" Isaac replied, "I don't know. The security guard is new and doesn't know the protocols very well. It's possible he did, but there's something else. After Damon left, I reviewed the recordings myself with the manager. We saw something you need to know." Approximately 20 minutes before Rita overheard that conversation, the cameras captured Damon entering that room with another man. That man stayed there throughout the entire party, hidden. And after you fled, that man came out and met Damon in the parking lot. They had an intense conversation that looked very aggressive, with lots of gestures, and then they both got into the same car and drove away together. Hank and I exchanged alarmed glances. "Can you describe this other man for us?" Hank asked. Isaac replied, "Tall, robust, maybe 45 years old, short gray hair, strong build. He was dressed casually, jeans and a black leather jacket. He had a visible scar on the left side of his face, near his eye." Ellen turned pale when she heard the description. "I know that man," she whispered. "I was introduced to him once about 2 months ago. Damon said he was his boss at the real estate company. His name was Richard." Everything clicked into place. Richard wasn't just an accomplice. He was the principal partner in this scam scheme. He was probably the mastermind behind the whole operation, while Damon was the actor, the seducer, the one doing the dirty work of gaining the victim's trust. Hank spoke with authority. "Isaac, I need you and the hall manager to preserve those recordings. Don't erase them. Don't touch them. They are crucial evidence. I'm going to send officers this afternoon to officially collect them. Can you do that?" Isaac responded firmly. "Of course. I already told the manager this was serious. He's cooperating completely. We also have the audio recordings of the calls Damon made from the office phone last night. He called someone at the clock was 1 minute past 0 hours and spoke for 15 minutes. We don't know what he said, but we have a record of the call and the number he called." Hank was writing furiously in his notebook. "Perfect. You are a key piece in this case. Isaac, thank you very much for your help." After hanging up, Hank looked at us with a serious expression. "This is getting bigger and more dangerous than I thought. If Richard is involved and has a history of violence, which I suspect because of that scar, then the two of you are at real risk. He's not just a solitary scammer, it's an organization. And when criminal organizations lose money and control, they can become violent." A shiver ran down my spine. Ellen grabbed my hand tightly. "What do we do then?" she asked in a small voice. Hank stood up and started pacing, thinking. "First, we go to the station and file the formal report with all this information. Second, I'm going to request an immediate arrest warrant for Damon based on the identity theft and the previous cases. Third, I'm going to put police protection on this house. And fourth, the two of you do not leave here without an escort until we have these men behind bars." "Understood." We both nodded. The reality of the situation was settling over us like tons of concrete. This was no longer just a financial scam. We were potentially in physical danger. We spent the next few hours at the police station giving detailed statements. Ellen had to recount the entire story of her relationship with Damon, every intimate and painful detail, while an officer took notes. I recounted exactly what I heard in that conversation, word for word, trying not to forget any crucial detail. We signed documents. We authorized access to our bank accounts so they could be monitored for suspicious activity, and provided photographs of Damon from the wedding. Hank coordinated with other departments, making calls, sending emails, building the case piece by piece. Around noon, he received a call that made him frown gravely. He hung up and looked at us with concern. They sent officers to Damon's last known address, the apartment Ellen mentioned. It's empty, completely empty. Neighbors say they never actually saw him live there. He only went occasionally, always for a short time. It was a fake address, probably just rented so he would have something to show if anyone asked. Ellen closed her eyes in pain. I don't even know where he really lives. I don't know anything real about him. Hank continued. We also verified his supposed workplace, the real estate company he mentioned. It doesn't exist. The address he gave corresponds to an office building, but there is no company with that name registered there. Everything was a lie. Every address, every place, every detail was carefully fabricated. I felt a mixture of terror and rage. This man had built a completely false identity with the sole purpose of destroying my daughter. How long had he planned everything? How long had he been watching us before approaching Ellen? The idea made me nauseous. Hank put a hand on my shoulder. But it's not all bad news. I managed to contact the former victims. Florence, the woman in Texas, agreed to speak with us via video conference. She says she's willing to testify if it means they will finally catch this man. The woman in Arizona is still considering it, but she seems more open now that she knows she's not alone, that there are other victims. We returned to Hank's house as evening fell. There were 2 police officers parked outside in a patrol car, watching. Inside the house, Hank set up his computer for the video conference with Florence. When the image appeared on the screen, I saw a woman of about 50 years old with brown hair and sad eyes. But when she spoke, her voice was strong and determined. You don't know how happy I am that you found out in time, Florence said, looking directly at Ellen. I wasn't so lucky. I married him, we lived together for 6 months, and during that time, he systematically convinced me to invest all my money in fake businesses. When I finally realized what was happening, it was already too late. I had lost $250,000, my house was mortgaged to the hilt, and he had disappeared without a trace. He left me a note saying he had left me because I was boring and that he didn't love me anymore. He didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth. Tears were running down Ellen's cheeks as she listened. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Florence shook her head sadly. Don't feel sorry for me, dear. Feel pity for the women who will come after if we don't stop him now. That man is a professional predator. He knows exactly what type of women to target. Lonely women, divorced, widows, with money but emotionally vulnerable. He studies his victims, learns their weaknesses, and exploits them mercilessly, and he doesn't work alone. That man you call Richard was also in my life, pretending to be his business partner. He was the one who handled the entire financial aspect of the fraud, while your husband took care of the romance. Hank leaned toward the camera and asked, Florence, would you be able to identify Richard if we showed you a photo? She nodded with determination. Hank sent her some images captured from the event hall's security cameras. Florence examined them, and her face hardened. That's him, without a doubt. That's the same man who convinced me to sign documents that turned out to be property transfers. He told me they were routine investment papers. I was so stupid. Her voice cracked, but she immediately recomposed herself. But I'm not that scared, ashamed woman anymore. I'm ready to testify. I'm ready to see them pay for what they did to us. The conversation continued for almost an hour. Florence told us every detail of her experience, the manipulation patterns Damon used, the red flags she ignored because she was desperate for love and companionship. Many of the things she described were identical to what Ellen had experienced. The accelerated romance, the grandiose promises, the subtle isolation from friends and family, the constant but disguised pressure to access financial resources. It was as if Damon followed an exact manual for each victim. When we finally ended the call, Ellen was emotionally exhausted, but also stronger. "I'm not alone in this," she said firmly. "There are other women who suffered the same thing, and together we are going to make sure there are no more victims." I hugged her with pride. My daughter was showing a strength I didn't know she had. The pain had transformed her not into a permanent victim, but into a determined survivor seeking justice. That night, while we tried to rest in Hank's guest room, my phone vibrated with another message. This time it wasn't from Damon. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "Rita, you made a grave mistake taking Ellen away. She is my wife legally. I have rights. If you don't return her voluntarily, I am going to use every legal resource available to recover her. And believe me, I have very good lawyers." I showed the message to Ellen, who turned pale. "He's lying, right? He can't force me to go back to him?" I quickly went downstairs and showed the message to Hank, who was still working at the dining room table surrounded by files and documents. He read the message and let out a bitter laugh. "He's trying to intimidate you. Technically, yes, you are legally married, but Ellen is an adult with full decision-making capacity. No one can force her to live with someone against her will. And once we file for an annulment based on fraud and false identity, that marriage will be null and void, as if it never existed." I breathed a sigh of relief, but the message had deeply disturbed me. The implicit threat was clear. Hank must have seen my expression because he added, "But you're right to worry. This message indicates that he is escalating. He is no longer pretending to be the loving, concerned husband. Now he is showing control and threat. That means he probably knows his plan failed and is desperate. Desperate criminals are unpredictable and dangerous." I barely slept that night. Every noise in the house startled me. Every shadow that passed by the window seemed like a threat. Ellen couldn't sleep either. We stayed awake whispering in the dark, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Just yesterday, she had been a radiant bride dancing at her wedding. Now she was a woman hiding in a detective's house, running from the man who swore he loved her. The speed of the change was dizzying and terrifying. At dawn on the second day, Hank entered the room with a grave expression. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Damon filed a kidnapping report. He's alleging that Rita forcibly took Ellen against her will and that she's being held somewhere unknown." Ellen sat up abruptly in bed. "That's ridiculous. I left voluntarily. He knows that." Hank nodded. "Of course he knows. But he's playing a legal game. If he manages to generate enough pressure and official attention, it could complicate our investigation. Fortunately, I already spoke with my superiors and explained the real situation. No one is going to take his report seriously, especially since we have the video recordings that clearly show you left voluntarily. But this shows he is changing tactics." We all went down to the kitchen, where Hank had brewed strong coffee. While we drank in tense silence, his phone rang. He answered, and his expression hardened as he listened. "I understand. Yes. No. Keep him there. I'm on my way." He hung up and looked at us with a mixture of concern and satisfaction. "Damon just showed up at your house, Rita. Neighbors saw him trying to force the back door. They called the police, and when the officers arrived, he alleged he was just trying to get into his mother-in-law's house because he was worried. They detained him for trespassing and attempted illegal entry. They have him in custody right now." My heart leaped. "That means he's arrested?" Hank shook his head. "It's a minor charge. He'll probably be released on bail in a few hours, but it gives me an opportunity to officially interrogate him. And more importantly, now we have probable cause to request a search warrant for any property associated with him, get his financial records, and start building the complete criminal case." He put on his jacket and added, "You two stay here. Don't go out for any reason. The officers outside have strict orders not to let anyone in except authorized personnel. I'm going to the station, and I'm going to confront that bastard face to face." After Hank left, the house felt empty and silent. Ellen and I sat in the living room, holding hands, waiting. The hours passed slowly. Every minute felt like an eternity. Around noon, Ellen's phone started ringing. It was her own phone, which she had forgotten in her purse throughout the escape. She had turned it off since the wedding night, but now it was on and ringing. Damon's name appeared on the screen. "Don't answer," I told her quickly. But Ellen looked at the phone with a determined expression. "I want to hear what he has to say. I want to hear how he tries to manipulate me now that he knows everything is exposed." She answered, putting it on speakerphone. Damon's voice sounded soft, almost vulnerable. "Ellen, my love, please listen to me. I don't know what your mother told you, but it's all a terrible misunderstanding. I love you. I love you with all my heart. These 2 days without you have been hell. Please, just give me a chance to explain, to clear everything up. We can fix this together." Ellen squeezed my hand tightly, but her voice came out firm when she replied, "Damon, you don't have to pretend anymore. I know who you really are. I know what you were planning to do. I know about Florence, about the woman in Arizona, about all your lies. It's over." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Damon finally spoke, his voice had completely changed. The soft, loving tone had disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "So your mommy told you everything," he said with venomous sarcasm. "What a shame. I thought we had more time before the nosy old lady ruined everything. But it doesn't matter. Ellen, we are already married. I already have legal rights, and believe me, I'm going to use them all. I can make your life very difficult if you don't cooperate." Ellen was trembling but kept her voice firm. "Threaten me all you want. I'm not afraid of you. And the marriage is going to be annulled. You used a false identity. You married under fraudulent pretenses. Legally, that marriage is worth nothing." Damon laughed, a cold laugh that made my skin crawl. "False identity? Fraud? Good luck proving that, darling. I have perfect documents, verified identification, complete employment history. You can try whatever you want, but it's going to cost you years and thousands of dollars in lawyers. And you know what? Throughout all that time, I'll be there, being your legal husband, complicating every aspect of your life." I interrupted the conversation before he could continue poisoning my daughter with his threats. "Damon, Rita speaking. I heard you that night. I heard every word you said about us, about your plan, about the other women, and there's already an official investigation against you. Detective Hank Rodriguez has all the information about your previous identities, about Richard, about everything. So your threats mean nothing." There was another silence, and then Damon spoke directly to me with pure hatred in his voice. This is all your fault, you meddling old woman. If you hadn't been where you shouldn't have been, listening to private conversations, right now you would be happily signing checks to invest in my businesses. Ellen would be happy in her marriage, and I would have what I was owed. But no, you had to ruin everything with your possessive mother paranoia." His words hurt, but they also infuriated me. "What you were owed," I repeated in disbelief. "You are owed nothing. That money I earned with years of honest work, that house I built with my late husband, my daughter is not a bank account for you to bleed dry. You are a thief, a liar, and an emotional abuser, and you are going to pay for every tear you caused Ellen." Damon exploded with rage. "Abuser? I gave your daughter the best performance of her life. I made her believe she was special, desirable, worthy of love. Without me, she would just be another bitter, lonely divorcee. I did her a favor by making her feel alive again. And as for the money, you two silly old women with more money than you deserve were going to waste it anyway. I was just going to redistribute it more efficiently." Ellen abruptly hung up the phone, her hands shaking and tears of rage streaming down her cheeks. "That monster! That complete monster! How could I not see what he really was?" I hugged her as she sobbed into my shoulder. "Because he's a professional actor, my love. He has perfected his technique for years. It's not your fault. It was never your fault." But even as I comforted my daughter, a part of me was terrified. Damon had just shown his true nature, his capacity for hatred and cruelty. And a man like that, cornered and desperate, was capable of anything. Hank returned home 2 hours later with an exhausted but triumphant expression. "I interrogated him for a full hour," he said, slumping onto the sofa. "That man is incredibly good at lying. He has answers for everything, elaborate explanations, documents that support every lie. He denied everything, of course. He said his relationship with Ellen is genuine, that the accusations are the product of a jealous mother-in-law, that he has never used false names. But he made one mistake. He leaned forward, his eyes bright. When I asked him about Richard, his face changed for a fraction of a second. He said he didn't know anyone by that name, but his micro-expressions gave him away. And then, when I showed him the photos from the event hall's security cameras where he appears entering that room with Richard, he tried to say it was just a casual wedding guest. But we checked the guest list. Richard was not on any list. No one officially invited him. He was there specifically to meet with Damon in secret. Ellen wiped her tears and asked, "Was he arrested? Is he going to stay in jail?" Hank shook his head with frustration. "Not yet. The judge gave him $20,000 bail for the trespassing charge. Someone paid the bail in cash, and he was released an hour ago. But I have good news, too. We got the warrant to access his financial records, and what we found is pure gold for our case." He opened his laptop and showed us a series of bank transfers. Over the last 3 years, there have been multiple large transfers from accounts in the names of Damon Cortez, Richard Vega, and Mason Montoya to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The amounts match exactly what the former victims reported losing. This establishes a clear pattern of organized fraud. It's not an isolated crime. It's a sophisticated criminal operation. I looked at the numbers on the screen, feeling nauseous. $250,000 from Florence, $300,000 from the woman in Arizona, and it would have been another $500,000 of ours if we hadn't escaped in time. "How long is it going to take to build a solid case?" I asked. Hank closed the laptop and replied honestly, "Normally, a case like this could take months or even years, but we have unique advantages. We have victims willing to testify. We have video evidence of him using multiple identities. We have financial records showing the pattern of fraud. And we have Rita's direct testimony about the conversation she overheard. If we work quickly and coordinate with federal prosecutors, because this crosses state lines, we could have enough to formally arrest him in 1 week, maybe 2. 1 week. 2 weeks of living hidden, of constantly looking over our shoulders, of being afraid every time the phone rang. It was terrifying, but it was also hope. There was an end in sight. That night, while Ellen finally managed to sleep, exhausted by the emotions, I stayed awake looking out the room window. The police officers were still out there in their patrol car, protecting us. But I felt vulnerable anyway. Damon knew where I lived. He probably knew where Ellen worked. He knew our routines, our friends, our favorite places. He had spent months studying us. And now that his plan had failed, how far would he be willing to go? My phone vibrated with a message. This time it was from a private number. "This isn't over. You owe me, and I always collect my debts." I ran downstairs and showed the message to Hank, who was still awake reviewing documents. His expression hardened. "I'm going to trace this number, and I'm going to add harassment and threats to the list of charges. But Rita, you have to be honest with me. How safe do you feel here? Because if you need additional protection, I can arrange to have you moved to an official safe house." I considered the option, but the idea of being locked up in an unknown place, without any freedom, sounded like another prison. "We're fine here with you," I finally said. "But I need you to promise me something. I need you to catch that man before someone gets hurt." Hank placed his hand over mine. "I promise you. That man is going to pay for everything he did. I'll personally make sure of that." The following days passed in a strange mixture of boredom and constant terror. We couldn't leave the house. Hank brought us food and supplies. Ellen spent hours on the phone with lawyers discussing the annulment of the marriage and protecting her financial assets. I spoke with Florence several more times, and eventually also with Alice, the victim from Arizona, who finally decided to join the case. Hearing their stories, so similar to ours, was painful but also empowering. We weren't alone. We were 3 strong women who refused to be silent victims. On the 5th day after the wedding, Hank arrived home with a grim expression. "We have a big problem," he announced. "Damon has disappeared. He's not at his last known address, he's not responding to court summonses, and his phone is off. But there's something worse. Richard also disappeared. And this morning, Florence in Texas received a threat similar to the one you received, Rita. Someone sent her a message saying she would pay for testifying. My blood ran cold. Is she okay? Is she safe? Hank nodded. Yes, I've already coordinated with local police to give her protection. But this confirms what I feared. Damon and Richard aren't running. They are escalating. They are becoming aggressive, probably because they know the walls are closing in on them. Ellen turned pale. What does that mean for us? Hank looked us straight in the eyes. It means we have to be prepared for the worst. It means these men might try something desperate. As if his words had summoned the danger, at that exact moment, we heard a loud noise outside, a crash of breaking glass. Hank immediately pulled out his weapon and ordered us, "Upstairs, now, lock yourselves in the bathroom and don't come out until I tell you." Ellen and I ran upstairs, our hearts pounding violently. We heard shouting outside, the voices of the officers, more sounds of struggle. I peered out the bathroom window and saw a scene of chaos. Someone had thrown a rock wrapped in paper through the patrol car window. The officers had run off, chasing a figure fleeing down the dark street. And on the paper tied to the rock, there was a message scrawled in black marker in large letters. "Hand over Ellen, or next time will be worse." Ellen sobbed, and I hugged her as we heard Hank's footsteps quickly coming up the stairs. Hank knocked on the bathroom door and said urgently, "It's me. Open up." I opened the door, trembling, and he entered with a furious expression. The officers lost the subject. He ran too fast and knew the neighborhood too well. But we got something. One of the neighbor's security cameras caught his face for a second. I'm already sending the image for analysis. He showed us his phone. The image was blurry but recognizable. It was Richard. "He's here," I whispered, terrified. "He's in the city. He knows where we are." Hank nodded gravely. "Yes, and that means Damon is probably nearby too. But this also means they are desperate and making mistakes. Throwing that rock was a stupid act that gives us more evidence against them." Direct threats, harassment, witness intimidation. The charges are piling up. Ellen sat on the edge of the bathtub with her head in her hands. "I can't live like this, Mom. I can't be hidden forever, afraid that man will show up at any moment. There has to be another way." Hank knelt in front of her and spoke with a firm but gentle voice. "There is. We're going to set a trap for them. We are going to use that phone that called you to track them down and lure them to a place where we can arrest them with all the necessary evidence. But it's going to require you to be brave. Ellen, it's going to require you to act as bait." I immediately intervened. "No, absolutely not. I will not allow you to put my daughter in danger." Hank raised his hands in a calming gesture. "Listen to me completely before you decide. The idea is for Ellen to send Damon a message saying she wants to talk, that she's confused, that maybe her mother manipulated things. She'll ask to meet him in a public place, let's say a coffee shop, but the location will be completely surrounded by undercover officers. The moment Damon shows up and says something incriminating, which we know he will because his ego can't resist bragging, we arrest him with a full SWAT team if necessary. Ellen will never actually be in danger because she'll have invisible protection from every angle." Ellen looked up with renewed determination in her eyes. "I'll do it." I grabbed her hand, desperate. "No, it's too risky. What if something goes wrong? What if he brings a gun? What if Richard is with him?" Hank replied with professional confidence. "That's why we'll plan it meticulously. Ellen will wear a hidden microphone to record the entire conversation. She'll have a panic device in her purse. There will be snipers on nearby buildings, plainclothes officers at surrounding tables, and I'll be in a surveillance van less than 20 meters away. At the first sign of real danger, we intervene. But we need him to confess, to say something we can use in court, and he'll only do that if he thinks he still has control over Ellen." Ellen squeezed my hand and looked at me with pleading eyes. "Mom, I have to do this, not just for us, but for Florence, for Alice, and for all the women who could be his next victims if we don't stop him now. I can't live in fear for the rest of my life. I need to face him one last time, and I need to see him fall." Her words broke my heart, but they also filled me with pride. My little girl had become an extraordinarily brave woman. I swallowed my fear and nodded slowly. "All right, but with every precaution possible." And if at any moment I feel it's too dangerous, we stop everything. Agreed. Hank nodded solemnly. Agreed. Now let's plan every detail. We spent the rest of the night and all the next morning preparing the operation. Hank coordinated with his team, chose the perfect location, a popular downtown coffee shop with multiple entry and exit points that could be easily controlled, and rehearsed with Ellen exactly what to say and how to act. They placed a tiny microphone in the necklace she was wearing and a panic device disguised as a keychain in her purse. They practiced discreet hand signals she could use if she needed immediate help. At noon on the 6th day after the wedding, Ellen took her phone with trembling hands and wrote the message that could change everything. "Damon, I need to see you. I'm confused about everything that happened. Maybe Mom exaggerated things. Can we talk? Just the two of us." The message was sent. And then we waited. 10 agonizing minutes passed. Then Ellen's phone vibrated with a response. "Of course, my love. I knew you'd come to your senses. Your mother has been poisoning you against me, but our love is stronger than her lies." "Where and when?" Ellen replied with the name of the coffee shop and the time. The clock was 3 minutes past 0 hours. Damon answered almost immediately. "I'll be there. I love you. Ellen, everything is going to be fine. I promise." Seeing those manipulative words churned my stomach. How dare he continue to play with my daughter's emotions, even now? Hank checked all the equipment one last time. "Remember, Ellen, keep the conversation as natural as possible. Let him talk, let him boast, let him confess. Men like him can't resist explaining their own intelligence once they think they've won, and record every word." At the clock was 30 minutes past 2 hours. The team deployed. Plainclothes officers positioned themselves in the coffee shop, pretending to be normal customers. Snipers took positions on nearby buildings. A surveillance van with advanced monitoring technology parked at the end of the block, and Ellen, my brave daughter, sat at a table by the coffee shop window, waiting for the monster who almost destroyed our lives to appear. I was in the surveillance van with Hank, watching multiple screens that showed different angles of the coffee shop. I could see Ellen clearly, sitting with her hands on the table, trying to look calm, even though I knew she was terrified inside. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. "She's going to be fine," Hank assured me for the 10th time. "We have this completely controlled." At the clock was 0 minutes past 3 hours exactly. Damon appeared. I watched him walk down the street with that arrogant confidence he had always possessed, impeccably dressed in a gray suit and a charming smile, as if nothing had happened, as if he wasn't a wanted criminal. He entered the coffee shop and walked directly to Ellen's table. From the van, we could hear everything perfectly through Ellen's microphone. "My love," Damon said in a soft voice full of false relief, "I was so worried about you. Come here." He extended his arms to hug her, but Ellen remained seated, rigid. "Just sit down, Damon. We need to talk." He sat down across from her, studying her with those calculating eyes. "Of course. Talk to me. Tell me what your mother told you to turn you against me." Ellen took a deep breath and began the most important performance of her life. "She says she overheard a conversation, that you were talking to someone about stealing our money, that the whole thing was a plan from the beginning." Damon made an expression of perfect shock, as if the accusation was the most absurd thing he had ever heard. "What? Steal from you? Ellen, that's ridiculous. Your mother is jealous of our happiness. She can't accept that her daughter grew up and found her own way. She probably overheard some business conversation taken out of context, and her imagination created a whole conspiracy." Ellen feigned doubt, biting her lip. "So you weren't planning anything bad? There's no truth to what she's saying?" Damon took Ellen's hands across the table with a theatrical gesture of sincerity. "My love, I swear to you on everything you hold dear that I genuinely love you. Yes, it's true I wanted to help you invest your money wisely so we could have a prosperous future together. That's not a crime. That's being a good husband. And yes, I have business associates, including Richard, but everything is completely legitimate and legal." The mention of Richard made Hank lean toward the screen with renewed attention. "Good job, Ellen," he murmured. "Keep pushing." Ellen slowly withdrew her hands and asked, "What about the other women? Mom says you did this before with other people." For the first time, I saw a flash of irritation cross Damon's face. Other women? Your mother has really been busy inventing stories. There are no other women. Ellen, there never were. You are the only one. But his body language had subtly changed. He had become tenser, more defensive. Ellen noticed the change too and pressed harder. Then if they investigate your past, they won't find anything suspicious? No false identities? No previous marriages? Damon laughed, but the laugh sounded forced. Ellen, what is this? An interrogation? I thought you wanted to talk because you loved me, because you wanted to fix our marriage, but it seems you're only here to accuse me. Ellen kept her voice firm. I just want the truth, Damon. After all, if we're going to be together, I need to trust you completely. Damon leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, and his mask began to crack. The truth. Fine. The truth is that your mother is a nosy old woman who ruined the best plan I've executed in years. The truth is, yes, there is a Richard. And yes, we work together on certain lucrative projects. And the truth is that you and your mother with her easy money were the perfect targets. But it's also true that I started to feel something for you, Ellen. Not everything was a lie. In the van, Hank smiled with satisfaction. We've got him. He just confessed. Team, prepare to move. But before they could act, Ellen said something that wasn't in the plan. I knew you were a liar from the start, Damon. And now this entire conversation is being recorded, and there are police surrounding this place. You are finished. Damon's face completely transformed. The charm vanished, replaced by pure rage. He stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. Damn it, he growled. I knew this was a trap, but if I go down, you're coming with me. He reached into his jacket, and my heart completely stopped when I saw the flash of metal. Gun! He has a gun! Someone in the coffee shop yelled. Chaos erupted instantly. People started screaming and running for the exits. But the undercover officers moved faster. In a matter of seconds, 4 armed agents surrounded Damon, their weapons pointed directly at him. Drop the weapon! Hands up! Now! They yelled with absolute authority. Damon looked around with wild eyes, realizing he was completely surrounded. Ellen had dropped to the floor behind an overturned table, exactly as they had taught her. Damon held the gun for one more second, his face contorted with rage and desperation. Then slowly, he let the weapon drop to the floor and raised his hands. The officers immediately took him down, handcuffing him with quick professional movements. Damon Cortez, or whoever you really are, you are under arrest for fraud, theft, use of false identity, threats, attempted extortion, and now assault with a deadly weapon, declared one of the officers as they roughly lifted him from the floor. I ran out of the surveillance van without waiting for permission, pushing open the coffee shop door and rushing toward my daughter. Ellen! Ellen! She got up from the floor, trembling but unharmed. We hugged so tightly we could barely breathe, crying tears of relief and liberation. It's over, Mom! She cried against my shoulder. It's finally over! Hank came in behind me with an expression of satisfaction. Excellent job. Ellen, you were incredibly brave. We got his full confession recorded on high-quality audio and video, plus the attempted assault with witnesses present. This man isn't going to see the light of free day for many, many years. As they dragged Damon toward the patrol car, he turned his head toward Ellen and shouted with pure venom, This isn't over. I have lawyers. I'm going to get out, and when I do, you are going to regret this. But his threats sounded hollow now. He was just a pathetic, defeated man being led to the justice he had evaded for so long. Hank approached Damon before they put him in the patrol car and said in a cold voice, Oh, and one more thing. We just arrested your partner Richard 20 minutes ago at a motel across town. He tried to escape out the back window, but he didn't get far. The 2 of you are going to share a cell while you await trial. Damon's expression completely crumbled. They put him in the car and drove away, sirens blaring through the streets. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal activity. Damon and Richard were formally charged with multiple felonies in 3 different states. Florence and Alice came personally to testify, sharing their painful stories but also their strength. The 3 of us united not just as victims, but as survivors determined to get justice. The media covered the case extensively, exposing the network of fraud these men had operated for years. It turned out there were even more victims than we initially thought. Women who finally found the courage to come forward after seeing our story in the news. The trial lasted 2 months. Every day, Ellen and I sat in that courtroom listening to the testimonies, watching the evidence pile up like mountains against the defendants. The defense lawyers tried every possible tactic, but the evidence was overwhelming. The video recordings from the event hall, the recorded confession in the coffee shop, the financial records showing fraudulent transfers totaling more than $800,000, the testimonies of multiple victims. Everything painted an undeniable picture of organized criminality. When the verdict finally came in, the courtroom was completely silent. In the case of the state versus Damon Cortez and Richard Vega, the judge began with a solemn voice, the jury has found the defendants guilty of all charges. Ellen squeezed my hand so tightly it almost cut off my circulation. Tears of relief streamed down our cheeks. Guilty. On all charges. Justice finally served. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Damon received 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the first 15 years. Richard received 22 years for his role as organizer and accomplice. Furthermore, they were ordered to pay full restitution to all their victims. It wasn't about the money. It was about these men paying for the emotional pain they caused, for the lives they shattered, for the trust they betrayed. When we walked out of the courtroom that final day, the sun was shining with an intensity I hadn't seen in months. Ellen took a deep breath of the fresh air and said, "I can finally breathe again, Mom. I finally feel free." I hugged her and whispered, "I am so proud of you, my love, so incredibly proud." Florence and Alice joined us on the court steps. The 4 of us embraced. 4 women who had gone through hell but emerged stronger on the other side. The following months were a slow but steady process of healing. Ellen started therapy to process the emotional trauma of the betrayal. I also attended a few sessions because realizing how close we came to disaster had deeply affected me. The annulment of the marriage was quickly approved once the fraud was established. Ellen sold the wedding dress and donated the money to an organization that helped victims of romance scams. It was her way of turning something painful into something useful. But more important than all that, Ellen and I became closer than ever. We had faced the worst imaginable ordeal together and had emerged victorious. Our mother-daughter relationship was strengthened with an unshakable steel forged in adversity. Isaac, the waiter who helped us that crucial night, became a dear friend. Hank also became part of our extended family, a protective brother we will never forget. 6 months after the trial, Ellen met someone new. This time it was different. It was slow, careful, built on solid foundations of honesty and time. She had learned the red flags, developed sharper instincts, and, most importantly, had learned to value herself enough to never again accept crumbs of affection disguised as love. I learned my lessons too. I learned to trust my gut, not to ignore the warning signs, to understand that true love is never rushed and never has secrets. One Sunday afternoon, almost a year after that terrible wedding night, Ellen and I were sitting in my garden drinking iced tea and watching the flowers we had planted together bloom with vibrant colors. "You know what the strangest thing about all this is?" Ellen asked thoughtfully. "Sometimes I feel grateful that it happened." I looked at her, surprised. She nodded with a soft smile. "Not grateful for the pain, but grateful because it taught me who I really am. I discovered that I am much stronger than I thought. I learned that I can survive the most devastating betrayal and come out whole on the other side." I raised my glass of iced tea and said, "A toast, then, to lessons learned, to strength discovered, and to new beginnings." Ellen clinked her glass against mine with a genuine smile. "To new beginnings," she repeated, and as the sun set over our garden, painting the sky with golden hues, I knew we had reached the other side. Sometimes the most devastating endings are truly new beginnings in disguise. Sometimes losing everything teaches us what truly matters, and sometimes the greatest betrayal leads us to discover a strength we never knew we had. That crumpled napkin I wrote in a panic that night changed the course of our lives. It saved us from financial ruin, but more importantly, it saved us from years of deception and pain. And in the end, it gave us something that no money can buy. The absolute certainty that together, mother and daughter, we can survive any storm. Because true love does not manipulate, does not deceive, and is not rushed. True love protects, strengthens, and remains, even when everything else crumbles.